In today's video, I'm going to share 8 rules with you that you should follow if you want to become an amazing writer. Hey there bosses, you're welcome to my channel once again. If this is your first time on my channel, on this channel I give you tips, resources and strategies on how to make a living with your writing. If that sounds like your cup of tea, make sure to subscribe right there, all right, and hit the bell icon beside the subscribe button to join our community. So the very first rule is to make your writing conversational. When you're writing for the web, whether you're a blogger, freelance writer, writing content for other people, it's important that you make the language conversational, unless of course you're writing for a highly technical audience that loves to read with difficult language. But for the most part, a majority of people like to read simple, everyday conversational language. So keep it that way. And one of the ways you can do this is to use contractions like don't or won't or isn't instead of using is not or do not. And this is super helpful to keeping it conversational. Rule number 2 is to write with simple language, and this ties into the first point. People don't want to rack their brains to understand what you're trying to say. So make sure that you're keeping it simple with simple everyday language. In the United States, most people read at about an 8th grade level, but most people prefer to read at about a 6th grade level. And this is because for most people, it's easier on their minds. It's just easier for them to grasp and digest. So make sure you're keeping it simple. A tool that I personally use to check what grade level I'm writing at is the Hemingway app. And so if you just want to check which level you may be writing your content at, you can just copy and paste your content into the Hemingway app online, and it will tell you exactly what the grade level is. Number 3 is to use active voice. And so instead of saying the cake was eaten by Anna, you can just say Anna ate the cake. And as you can see, that sentence, Anna ate the cake, is so much more shorter and so much more to the point than the cake was eaten by Anna. Because at some point, if you use too much what is known as passive voice, right, which is the cake was eaten by Anna, if you use too much of that, people are going to have to be going back and forth to understand, okay, who was doing what? I need to understand that. But when you say Anna ate the cake, it's straightforward and people understand that. So make sure you're using more active voice versus passive voice. Number 4, be clear. All right. It's absolutely important that by the time somebody is done reading your content, they get the core message of what you've written. If somebody reads what you've written and at the end of it is scratching their head because yes, the sentences were simple to understand, yes, you used contractions and made it conversational, but you were not really clear in the message you were trying to deliver, then you have lost the situation. So one of the things you can do, for instance, is when you write your content, you can give it to somebody and say, hey, could you read this and summarize this for me and tell me what you got from this? And the person is able to give back to you the core message of what you were trying to share. Then you have succeeded. But if you write the content and then at the end, the person's like, I'm confused. I'm not really sure what you're saying here. Then Houston, we have a problem. So make sure that your content is always clear so that people come away with the main message that you were trying to communicate with that piece. Number 5 is to use short sentences and paragraphs, and this is so helpful, especially on the eyes. When I'm reading a book and it's just a huge block of text, it's extremely difficult. And if you have ever tried to read just a whole page of a block of text with no spaces and no paragraphs, you can attest to the fact that it's difficult to read. And especially so when people are reading on their cell phones or on their computers, right? So you want to make sure that you leave a lot of white space. You want to make sure that your sentences are short and concise. You want to make sure that your paragraphs are no more than maybe 3 or 5 sentences so that people can really get into the content, people can really stay, and it's easier for them to read and digest whatever it is that you've written. 6, it's important for you to cut out fluffy words and unnecessary words from your sentences. And so let me give you an example. Let's say you say something is very abundant. Well, abundant in of itself talks of something being a lot, right? So you don't need to use very. That word very in front of abundant is just redundant. I just rhymed. So you can cut out words like that. And a tool that really helps me when it comes to cutting out some of my fluffy words, because I know I get guilty of this sometimes, is once again the Hemingway app. And one of the rules I personally follow also is I'll read the sentence, and if there's any word in that sentence that I can take out but the sentence is still going to read perfectly and people are going to understand, I'll take it out, because it just means that word is just taking up real estate. Number 7, avoid using highly technical jargon, because most of the time that highly technical jargon may be only understood by a section of a particular industry. So instead of doing that, if you're going to absolutely have to use technical jargon, make sure that you explain what that word is at the beginning of your text, and maybe reiterate it if it's a longer piece somewhere in the text. But you want to really avoid using too many technical words when you're writing content, because it does make the reading difficult. You don't want people to have to pull out a dictionary or go to Google to research the word that you're using every single time they're trying to get through your content. It's really discouraging for people when they want to get through your content. So a good example I can cite, for instance, is a website like WebMD. So WebMD puts out content for the masses to learn about different medical conditions, but they do it in such a way that even though those conditions may have technical words that they could certainly use, and my background being in research and healthcare, I know that they're highly technical words that they could use, they avoid using that and use simpler terms that most people can understand. And so the regular Joe is going to be able to read something on WebMD and understand something that could be otherwise technical. So yes, something could be highly technical with a lot of technical words, but as much as possible, you should avoid that when you're writing for the web. Number 8 is always double check your work. If you've done all the research in the world, you're using short sentences, you're clear, you're concise, but there are a bunch of grammatical mistakes and spelling mistakes, it makes the work look sloppy and people are less likely to trust you. And one of the things you want to do with content really is to build trust, right? Because if you watch the video I did on content marketing, I said it's a way of attracting your audience, and then one of the ways you attract an audience is to get people to trust you. And so if you've written something that is rife with mistakes, people are going to be like, what's up with that? Like, they don't even care to double check, and it makes it difficult for people to trust you. So in order for you to create trustworthy work, make sure you're double checking. And if you can double check, make sure you give it to somebody else to proofread, give it to a spouse, give it to a friend, hire an editor, but it's absolutely helpful for you to always double check your work before you put it out there for the masses.